Welcome back to the channel of truth, trust, and transparency. Here, I provide you no BS advice about the property and the development industry so you can take it and use it how you wish. Today, I'm going to talk about my top 4 biggest mistakes that I see rookie, newcomer, and novice investors make. By the end of today's episode, if you can have learnt what they are and avoid them at all costs, it will ensure that you are going to move towards a successful property investor that makes money instead of one that does his or her ass in on their very first development project. I chat with and mentor a lot of younger people in the space, and it is a commonality between everyone that I speak to or that's thinking about jumping into the space, as well as some of these mistakes I have made myself. However, across the 10 years that I've spent in design and development, I've been able to get a really good handle on things, so trust me when I say this. Now, number 4, the 4th biggest mistake I see, and that is a lack of research. I think a lot of people that I see will dive in without knowing the entire nuts and bolts of the process. The funny thing is with development is, because it's sexy, people have this preconceived notion with development that it's sexy, developers make a lot of money, and everyone wants to do it and say that they're a property developer. I get it. However, if you do want to get involved and you do want that to be you, and you can make plenty of money, but you can also lose it too if you're not smart. And if you haven't done your research, that is going to be the easiest way to tell. After a couple of questions to somebody about what they're planning and what they're doing, I can tell straight away if they have done their research and know what they're talking about, or if they don't and they just look at me and I can see through them or their eyes glaze over. You need to do your research thoroughly. That comes to knowing the strategy and the type of development that you're going to undertake. That includes the planning pathway. So in New South Wales, that's a DA or a CDC, maybe even a planning proposal. Hopefully you're not learning how to do those on YouTube. It comes down to the team that you're going to use, the design. It comes down to the area, the data and analytics. It comes down to that entire construction process, builders, construction prices. It comes down to selling and all those kinds of things, finished product, sales, and knowing that process from start to finish. People just assume, even to simplify it back to, a duplex, that is one of the most simple types of property development. There are still so many moving parts. And if you haven't done your research and if you try to jump into it too quickly, that's where you can come unstuck. So you need to do your research. You need to potentially partner with or find a mentor in the space that you can either pay money or provide value in another way. Ensure that you learn the process from start to finish, and then respectively do that in your own patch that you're looking at, rather than try to just come in and undercut that person that is so generous with their time to help you out. Number 3 is going to be know your market. What do I mean by this? You need to, and it probably falls a little bit under research too, but knowing the market that you are buying in, knowing the market that you are selling in, and all those things in between. What do I mean by that? If you were going to try to, for example, do a duplex development in Bondi, New South Wales, eastern suburbs, extremely rich and affluent area, and you were to example, try to get Metricon Homes, that is a volume home builder, to run that project, that would be, to me, a key example of you not knowing your market, because you don't know the people that are buying and you don't know what they're trying to buy, because nobody in those suburbs is looking to buy a kit house from a volume builder. People want luxury, people want exclusivity, people want high-end finishes and fixtures, and you're not likely to get that in those particular builds with those particular builders. No, absolutely no shade to them, but Metricon, we know what they are. They're a volume project home builder. You also need to know the market in which that you're buying, where it sits at that growth rate cycle. what part of the growth rate cycle that particular market is in. How quick do you need to move? When do you need to get that project on sale to time it with the market? You need to know the market. You need to know exclusively the people that you are creating that project for. And I'll give you a really good story firsthand about how I did this for my last development project. For me, it was attending as many open homes as possible to learn and walk through each of the products that were on sale from other developers. When I did that, I can see what the other developers are building. I can see the quality of the finished product. So I know what the end product is. Knowing my market and the people that I'm designing for, at those particular open homes, the only people going through them are obviously either builder or developers like me or the people that want to buy them. And so what I did at the open homes, and here's a little tip, is I started talking to the people that were going through the homes, and I can see that quite quickly there were two different types of people for my last development. Now, it was really funny because by doing that, I probably found a bit of information that I wouldn't have found anywhere else talking to anyone, and that was the particular type of product that was on the market. The developers were building one thing because that's what they could and that's what they could fit on site to be feasible. However, a lot of the market were looking for something else. However, what the market was actually demanding couldn't be built because it was not feasible. And so that a site came up that made that product feasible to design and have on a block. And I could build it for a better price. And the best part is because there's such little of that stock on market, the GRs, which is obviously the gross realization or the value of the project, is extremely higher. So for me, it's about knowing in great detail the market. The same goes for not only the builders of the area, who are your high volume resi builders? What is the reputation of the builder in the area? Do people go and go, oh, it's built by, Smith and Son Homes, like, ew, or, oh, wow, it's built by, David and Co. They got like the Grayer boys from Queensland. I've done an interview with them on the Everything Property podcast. And one thing that Rob said to me offline was people will pay 10 to 20% extra just for a Grayer product. That is the marketing and that's the brand. So if you're a developer and you're instructing a builder to build your project, you need to know that market exclusively and intrinsically to know what builder is providing that value and who do you need to get to build it and who for. So, is it just a cheap and quick and easy, volume project home builder because your buyers are first home buyer and young people and they don't really care, they just want to get in the market? Or is it a really exclusive builder with a brand name like Grayer that people are willing to pay overs for because you're in that sort of high-end market? You need to know that market as much as possible. The same goes for sales agents. So the sales agents, they're all going to work extremely differently. They're going to have different reputations. They're all going to sell different stock. They're all going to have a certain brand and feel about them, and it is who aligns with that product that you're selling and who are you trying to sell it for. For example, Marty Fox from White Fox has a very high, elegant, really well polished brand. They're hiring out cars. It's theatre when you're watching their videos, and they're crafting that. Now, if my end product is again, to use that first example, is a cheap townhouse for first-home buyers that I'm getting a volume home to builder, it wouldn't really make sense to me going to White Fox to get them to sell that particular product because it just the two don't align. So you need to make sure and do your research on the sales agent too. You also need to do your research on method of sale, on fixtures and finishes. What are people actually after? This is where a lot of developers go wrong. They don't know their market and they pick and design based on what they think in here and in here. That is going to waste you a lot of money. There is no use. A lot of people, one, if you can't see it, don't spend extra money on it because no one's going to know, right? No one's going to be able to see it and quantify spending that money. And it's a good chance is, for example, if you're bidding townhouses, I love townhouses at the moment. If you're bidding a townhouse that's selling for, say, 900 grand, the fixtures and finishes in that townhouse are going to be very different compared to one that maybe you're selling for $3 million. The brand of the tapware, the stone selection, the appliances, they're going to really matter in that $3 million townhouse compared to, the cheapest stock where people just want a name that they recognize. So you really need to know and do your research and know the market that you are selling in. People come through and they want to design this really lavish, finished, duplex or townhouse. Brother, let's wind it back a few steps. That's not the market. There's not people looking for that particular type of product. And because there isn't, you're either going to have the product stay on market for a very long time, or you're not going to be able to get the value back in the GR, which means you've spent more on the build, which means your profit is decreasing. So you need to be designing exactly for your market, fixtures and finishes, even the sale type and how you sell it. You need to do your research and know how people in that area are behaving, stock on market in terms of what else is selling, how they're selling it, and that sort of thing. So knowing your market in great detail is vital from the start of the process to the finisher. And even with that builder, the same thing even goes for architects too. If you're in a market where people care about the design of it and the architect, a perfect example in the Sydney's eastern suburb, Luigi Rosselli is a world-renowned, famous Italian architect. He has an extremely interesting design, taste, and flair. And I know when his name goes on a project, you will get an extremely high or higher GR compared to if it was just a no-name architectural firm. Now, mind you, knowing what I know for that particular example, the build price and the spec of the stone and fixtures and materials, for anyone that's worked with Luigi Rosselli will know that it's probably more expensive, but that's again, knowing exactly who it is, your market, maybe it's interiors too, and the brands associated with them, and who you're designing for. Number 2, biggest error I see rookie developers make is going to be your numbers. Not knowing your numbers. Social media, for whatever reason, has made us kind of forget and throw out our numbers and not know how to do this stuff. Every time I see it, these Instagram developers, influencers, they go around and say, "Oh, I bought the price for this much. I bought the property for this much. I then did a DA which cost me 50 grand, and then I built it, and then I sold it, and then that's it. And then I made $1 million. My issue, and any developer out there worth their skin in the game and is listening to this video or watching this video will know that those guys don't know their fucking numbers. They don't know anywhere close to their numbers, because I can name for you 14 things off the top of my head that they have missed. Whether it's DA, whether they've missed CC, council contributions, state contributions, they've missed QS, they've missed valuations, they've missed construction, they've missed a realistic construction amount, they've missed GST, they've missed contingency, they've missed 10 to 15 other things, which when you go back and you stack the numbers together, I like to do it for fun. That's how sick I am, and that's what my hobbies are. And I do the project, I go, mate, you're not making $1 million. You're probably making 200 grand. Like, it is ridiculous. Another thing around numbers as well is knowing your numbers when it comes to not only the feasibility, but knowing your numbers in terms of what it can actually sell for, what it can be built for, and those sorts of things. I once went to a property developer meetup. I thought I'd give these one. I've been to a few. Most of the time they're pretty shit, but I went to one, and this guy was propositioning me to be an equity partner on a duplex deal in Melbourne. And he had in his feasibility the construction price for 2 high-end 3-story duplexes for 500 grand total. Not per side, 500 grand total. And I looked at him and I thought, are you taking the piss? I said, look, I thank you very much for the opportunity. It's not for me. And that particular person, I remember so clear as day. Another guy came over because he heard the conversation, and we just looked at each other. And I said, man, look, take it from me, a little bit of advice. You cannot physically build what you're propositioning for this amount. I think you either need to find a builder and speak to a builder, or you need to really check your numbers, because it didn't work. And those sorts of projects are charging, 15%. Those sorts of projects are returning 15% with those amounts in it. And I mean, imagine you add the extra $1 million on for the actual build price. I hate to see what they return. So not knowing your numbers in feasibility, not knowing your numbers in terms of build rates, sell and buy rates, but very quickly you need to develop not only like a back of the napkin FISO, but a way, and I'll probably go into this in more detail, but to be able to run through a deal quite quickly. When I have people on the Everything Property podcast and I interview developers and I talk money and we talk deals, or if I'm catching up with someone or I'm asking someone about a project, I will need build price, I would need buy price of the site, I would need construction price, and then I'll need sell price, and I'll be able to do the numbers on the rest of it to tell you if they're making money or not. There's a lot of, and you've got to be able to learn and do that really quickly. So if someone says to you, oh, this is the project, this is what I'm doing, I can straight away qualify you or unqualify you. I can ask you those 3 questions on the site. I know what else to put in there. I know how much it costs, and I can say, yeah, he's making money. Or I can go, you're not going to make a or I can go, you're not going to make a cent on that site, because they haven't factored in those other 14 things on your feasibility that they haven't taken into account. Knowing your numbers as well, with especially sales agent, and when you're trying to buy too. I mean, the feasibility has a lot of numbers, but your biggest 2 numbers in there are what you're buying that price for and what you're building it for. They're your 2 biggest costs. So if you can get granular on everything else, you should know straight away what it is, the market, what you have to buy that site for, what is then the land value per dwelling that you are constructing or building. So for example, if you're buying a site for $1 million and you're putting a duplex on it, 500 grand is your land value per dwelling. You need to know what that is, what your fees are on top of it, and what you can sell it for really quickly to be able to summarize whether or not that is a good site to give someone a yes or no. Hey, I've got a real estate agent calls you up. Hey, I've got a guy that wants to do this. What does he want for it? 1.2. 1.2? Jesus. I haven't seen these sites work for 1, let alone 1.2. And then the agent will be like, yeah, I know, he's a bit high. I was like, oh, look, you can know then straight away. And it shows the respect to people like the agent in that case, that this guy knows what he's doing. Agents will be able to smell that from a mile away, who is a experienced developer and who is inexperienced. And you might get that sale, but not on experience, because he knows, for example, if it's something that's already come to market on realestate.com, what you got to understand is that most real estate agents work with a few developers. So if that's popping up on realestate.com, there is a good chance that agent has shopped it around to the developers that he works with, or good chance, or he or she works with, good chance, and they've all said no. So if it pops up on market, you really need to think, are you doing your numbers right? Is that an opportunity or not? Because a lot of people won't know their numbers, and then they'll make a mistake, they'll buy too high. And what you'll get to learn when you get deeper in this is that you'll start to hate those people, because they come in, they artificially inflate the price of that particular area, which then kills every single deal for the other developers that know their numbers trying to get in. And the worst part is that they'll get 2 years down the track, then they'll understand and go, oh shit, now I know the issue that I've made. By then it's too late. You've got 2 years of DA fees, holding costs, purchase costs. You've either got to try to pull in some additional money because you won't get the full finance for it. So those people kill markets. So if you don't know your numbers, you're going to have the agents trying to overprice and sell you on bullshit. And you're going to lose both the respect of all the other developers in the area because you're overpaying. Now, the number one biggest mistake that I see novice and new rookie developers make. This is, and hands up, I will admit that I've done this before. When I first started, this is what I think. This is the mistake every developer starting out makes. They go, okay, I understand it. I'm going to go find the cheapest suburb possible, and I'm going to develop in there. This is your issue with that. Let's just say you're going to go into, and I see it all the time with developers then when they go into, say, the regional pockets. Those areas are extremely risky. Why? One, obviously your buying price and selling price is lower. Your margin then is lower. You might be doing a deal for 12 or 18 months to make 150 grand or 100 grand. Now, if you stuff up or your builder stuffs up and you got to redivert a sewer, that might be 45 grand in variations. So quite quickly in a suburb like that, one mistake or one oversight or one variation can pretty much kill a deal. Compare that to if I was developing in a site where the profit was $3 million and I had that 45 grand thing come up. I've got a lot more room and margin to move. So what people typically do, make the mistake, is they'll go to the cheapest region as possible and they'll go, I'm going to go here because I know I can buy the land for 400 grand and I can put townhouses on it. The issue that you'll find with that is even if you if you keep a house, you subdivide it off and you build, there is still going to be a minimum amount required in terms of construction for that dwelling. You can't just build for nothing these days. Even granny flats are 150, 200 grand, plus your planning costs. Now, if, for example, you enter that market and that finished product, that townhouse that is selling brand new on market is, say, 450 grand or 500 grand, you just don't have the margin there to be able to make any money because you always will have that townhouse construction cost. Now, let's say the townhouse construction cost, the bare ass minimum you can build a townhouse two-story for is 300 grand. Now, if you're selling that for 500 with all your other costs, you might be 20 or 30 grand profit per townhouse, which is absolutely nothing. This is what you should do instead. Instead of going to that, look for somewhere where the GRs are double that. So I still have that 400 grand construction price, but now I'm selling at 850. Now I'm selling at 900. I have a really good margin in there to be able to accommodate it. Now my land might be a little bit more expensive. Yes, correct. But there's different arbitrage and secrets there that I can go into in other episodes. And you want to make sure that you can get a good ratio of value to land carved up in townhouses. What do I mean by that? Obviously, the more that you can put on, the less your land price per dwelling is, and the more you can build in that rate per townhouse. Even if in the first instance, the land, you could sell off, you could keep the front house, sell it off, have zero debt. The townhouse is still going to cost you 300. You're still going to have planning, holding costs, and all additional for 100 grand. And you can only sell it for 450. So you can only ever make 450, or you can only ever make 50 grand profit per townie there. So you have such a thin margin. But all those costs are going to be the same. Now, your land cost might be a little bit more, but it's not going to be proportionally as much compared to the difference in GR, which is almost double. I hope that makes sense. But that's the number one issue that I see developers make, is they try to go to absolute cheapest as possible. My recommendation is always trying to look for areas that the finished product is at least above 750K. That's just my guidance for you if you're looking to start out in development, because When you start to get lower than that, your margins are really, really tight. And if you're starting out as a novice developer, there's going to be things that you miss. You might have delays. You might have, the builder might come back with variations. You might have different things that you haven't accounted for in your feasibility. And if you're at that price range where they're really, really cheap end products, you will quite quickly dissolve any profit margin you have. You'll be 2 years into an exercise that you've essentially paid for, and it's cost you money to do. You've made no profit, and you'll be like, oh, nah, F development. Developers don't make money, or it's too hard. Trust that for me. Trust me when I say that. I've seen it way too many times. As always, let me know in the comments any questions. If not, I'll see you tomorrow.